Hey there, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining me here on my channel, The Magical Solution. I've got my people here on TikTok, I've got my people here on YouTube, and I've got my people here on my private Facebook group, The Magical Solution. This is how we grow. So we are picking up where we left off, chapter 19 in our book, The Spirit Book by Allan Kardec. Super excited. So let's get started. The chapter title is called Occupations and Missions of the Spirit. And there's no subtitle, so that's a change, right? So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, first of all, thank you and welcome. Don't feel nervous about coming in halfway through the book. We are about halfway, a little bit more than that. And because everything that's in here, you can pick it up midway and not feel left behind. But if you do want to catch up, by all means, all the previous chapters that I've read so far are on my YouTube channel at The Magical Solution. And a quick synopsis is that this book is written from the perspective of Allan Kardec, who is the interviewer, if you will. He approaches it with a scientific mind, very skeptical, and he's interviewing other mediums who are channeling, who are literally speaking through, or the spirits are speaking through these mediums. And so he's getting these answers directly from spirits. And it's great so far. So here we go. Occupations and missions of the spirit. Question 558. Do spirits have any other duty besides their own personal improvement? They concur in the harmony of the universe and act as ministers in fulfilling God's will. Spirit life is a continuous occupation, but it is not at all arduous like that of earth, because it is no subject to bodily fatigue or the anguish of need. I'm going to put my glasses on for this, you guys. I'm going to bring this light over here because this is definitely... There we go. Woo! Question 559. Do less evolved spirits also perform a useful role in the universe? All have duties to fulfill. Doesn't the least of masons concur in the construction of a building as much as the architect does? 560. Does each spirit have special attributes? It is worth stating that we all must inhabit all places and must acquire knowledge of all things, successfully presiding over functions involving all the planes of the universe. However, as Ecclesiastes states, there is a time for everything. Thus, one spirit is currently fulfilling its destiny on this world, while another will accomplish or has already accomplished its destiny at another time on the earth, in the water or in the air, etc. 561. Are the functions that spirit perform in the order of things permanent for each spirit, and do such functions belong exclusively to the attributes of certain orders? All spirits must ascend, and various degrees of the scale in order to perfect themselves. Since God is just, God could not have given knowledge without effort to some, while others acquired it only in a painful manner. Likewise, among humans, no one reaches the supreme degree of skill in any art without having acquired the necessary knowledge by practicing the most elementary functions of that art. 562. Since spirits of the most advanced order have nothing more to acquire, are they in a state of absolute repose, or do they still have occupations to do? What do you think that they're doing for all eternity? Eternal idleness would be eternal torture. Well, then what is the nature of their occupations? Receiving orders directly from God, transmitting them throughout the universe, and supervising their execution. 563. Are the occupations of spirits unceasing? Unceasing, yes. If we understand that their thought is always active, for they live by thought. Did you hear that? Spirits live by thought. Yet, one must not equate their occupations with the material occupations of humans. They're very, they're very actively, what? Their very activity, sorry, is a delight because they know they are being useful. That is understandable for good spirits, but does the same apply to less evolved spirits? Less evolved spirits have occupations suitable for their nature. Would you entrust the works of cultured individuals to manual laborers? Wow, that is very elitist. I just realized that. Like he talks about these jobs as if they're like less than, you know what I mean? It's kind of a dick. All right, 564. Are there among spirits those who are idle or who do not occupy themselves with anything useful? Yes, but it is temporary and depends on the development of their intelligence. Certainly, as among humans, there are those who live only for themselves. Such idleness nonetheless weighs on them, and sooner or later, the desire to progress stirs the need for activity, and they are glad to make themselves useful once again. We are speaking of spirits who have arrived at the necessary point of self consciousness and free will. For at their origin, they are like newborn children who act more from instinct than from a determined will. 565. Do spirits examine our works of art and take an interest in them? They examine anything and may indicate the elevation of spirits and their progress. 566. Does a spirit who had a specialty on earth, a painter or an architect, for example, take a special interest in the works that were the object of its predilection during life? Everything blends into an overall objective. If the spirit is good, it will take an interest in them to the degree that they enable it to help with the evolution of souls towards God. Besides, you are forgetting that spirits who practice an art during the lifetime in which you knew them could have practiced another in a previous lifetime, because it is necessary for them to know everything in order to perfect themselves. Thus, according to their degree of advancement, it might be that nothing constitutes a specialty for them. This is what I meant when I stated that everything blends into an overall objective. Also, be aware of this. What is sublime to you in your backward world is no more than child's play when compared with what exists on more advanced worlds. Why would you suppose that the spirits who inhabit those worlds were there are arts unknown to you, would admire what you appear to them as no more than the work of a school child? As I have already stated, they examine whatever may indicate progress. Okay, well, we understand why such must be the case with highly advanced spirits, but we are speaking about more commonplace spirits who have not yet raised themselves above earthly ideas. Their case is different. Their point of view is more limited, and they may admire what you yourselves admire. 567. Do spirits sometimes meddle in our occupations and pleasures? Commonplace spirits, as you call them, yes. They are unceasingly around you and at times take a very active part in all that you do according to their nature. It is good that they do so in order to drive men and women forward in their different walks of life, exciting or moderating their passions. Spirits occupy themselves with things of this world according to whether or more evolved or less so. High order spirits undoubtedly have the ability to consider them in minutest detail, but they only do so to the degree that it is useful to progress. Low order spirits only attach an importance to such things in proportion to the remembrance that are still present in their memory and to material ideas that are not yet extinct. 568. Do spirits who have missions to fulfill do so while in errant state or in an incarnate state? They may do so in either state. For certain errant spirits, it is a great occupation. 569. What do the missions that may be entrusted to errant spirits entail? They are so varied that it would be impossible to describe them. Besides, there are those that you would not be able to comprehend. Spirits fulfill the will of God, and you are not able to grasp all the divine designs. Spirits' missions always have the good at their purpose, whether a spirit or as a human. They are in charge of helping the progress of humankind, nations, or individuals within a varying range of ideas that may be more specialized or less so in order to prepare the way for certain events to oversee the accomplishment of certain things. Did you guys hear that? Whether spirit or human, they're in charge of helping the progress of humankind. So that responsibility falls on all of us, whether we're alive or dead. Some have more restricted missions of a certain personal, where is this? Oh, personal or entirely localized manner, such as helping the sick, the dying, and the afflicted, and as guides watching over those who are under their protection, and directing them with their counsels or the good thoughts that they suggest. One could say that there are many kinds of missions as there are kinds of interests to watch over. Whether in the material realm or in the moral realm, a spirit advances according to how well it has performed its duty. 570. Do spirits always comprehend the designs that they are charged with executing? No. There are those who are blind instruments, while others know fully well the purpose for which they act. 571. Are advanced spirits the only ones who have missions to fulfill? A mission's importance is in relation to the spirit's ability and elevation. The courier who carries a dispatch also fulfills a mission, though it is not that of the general. 572. Is the mission of a spirit imposed on it or does it depend on its will? A spirit asks for it and is happy to receive it. May the same mission be requested by several spirits? Yes, there are frequently several candidates, but not all are accepted. 573. What does the mission of an incarnate spirit entail? Instructing human beings, helping them to advance, and improving their institutions by direct and material means. Missions are of various degrees of generality and importance. However, the one who cultivates the soil fulfills a mission as surely as one who rules or teaches. Everything in nature is linked together. At the same time in which a spirit is purifying itself through incarnation, it is also working to fulfill the designs of providence. Each one has its mission in this world because each one can be useful for something. 574. What could be the earthly mission of intentionally useless persons? There really are persons who live only for themselves and who do not know how to make themselves useful for anything. They are poor beings whom we should pity because they will painfully expiate their intentional uselessness, and their chastisement frequently begins, even in this world, through weariness and dissatisfaction with life. Since they had the right to choose, why did they prefer a life that would not be of any use to them? Among spirits, there are also lazy ones who recoil before a life of work. God allows them to do so. They will understand the inappropriateness of their uselessness later and at their own expense, and they will be the first to ask to make up for the lost time. Also, they had perhaps chosen a more useful life to begin with, but once in action they rejected it, allowing themselves to be misled by the suggestions of spirits who incited them to idleness. Ooh, 575. Common occupations would seem to be duties rather than missions per se, according to the idea normally associated with the word. A mission has a sense of importance that is less exclusive and especially less personal. From that point of view, how can we tell if a person has a real mission on earth? by the great things that they do and by the progress that enable their fellow beings to make. 576. Are those who have an important mission predestined to it before their birth, or do they have knowledge of it? Yes, sometimes. More often, they are unaware of it. They only have a vague notion of it when they arrive on Earth. Their mission is traced out after their birth and according to circumstances as God derives them along the path on which they must fulfill the divine designs. 577. When individuals do something useful, is it always in virtue of a previous and predestined mission, or might they have received an unforeseen mission? Not everything that individuals do is the consequence of a predestined mission. Instead, they are frequently the instrument a spirit uses in order to perform something it considers useful. For example, a certain spirit thinks it would be a good idea to write a book, which it would actually write a book if it were incarnate. So it seeks out the writer most capable of comprehending its thought and most capable of acting on it. It suggests the idea and directs its execution. Thus, this individual did not originally come to Earth with the mission of doing this particular work. The same thing applies to certain works of art and discoveries. It should be further noted that during its body's sleep, the incarnate spirit communicates directly with discarnate ones in order to discuss how the mission is to be carried out. 578. Yes, we are the incarnate spirits. Yes. So incarnate is us, and when he talks about the erudite spirits, he's talking about otherworldly spirits. 578. Can a spirit fail in its mission through its own fault? Yes, if it is not a high order spirit. So he's talking about other outside spirits. What are the consequences for it? It will have to start the work over again. This is the punishment. Furthermore, it will suffer the consequences of the problems it has caused. 579. Since a spirit receives its mission from God, how could God entrust an important mission of general interest to a spirit who may fail? Doesn't God know whether its general will be victorious or defeated? Rest assured that it is so, and the divine plans, when important, do not rely on those who might abandon the work in the middle of it. The whole issue for you is the knowledge of the future, which God possesses, but which is not given to you. 580. Does a spirit who incarnates to fulfill a mission have the same apprehensions as the one who incarnates to undergo a trial? No, it has experience. 581. Individuals who are the lights of humankind, those who enlighten humans with their genius, obviously have a mission. But amongst them are those who are mistaken and who, alongside great truths, spread great errors. How should we regard their mission? People like Trump, you know what I mean? As having been falsified by them. They are beneath the task they have undertaken. However, it is necessary to take circumstances into account. Geniuses must speak according to the time in which they live. Thus, a teaching that appears erroneous or puerile to a later era may have been sufficient during its own time. So he's talking about people who might be ahead of their time, may come across as foolish or unknowing, but really are geniuses who just so happen to be speaking to the wrong time. 582. Can parenthood be considered a mission? It is, without a doubt, a mission. And at the same time, a very great duty that involves parents more than they might think concerning their responsibility for the future. God has placed children under the care of their parents so that they may guide them on the path of the good, and has facilitated their task by giving children a frail and delicate organization that renders them accessible to all sorts of impressions. However, there are those who are more concerned with training the trees in their orchards and making them produce fine fruit than with training the character of their children. If their children fail to do if their children fail due to their neglect, they will have to bear the punishment. and the sufferings of their children will come back to them in a future life because they did not do what was incumbent on them for their children's advancement on the path of the good. 583. If a child goes astray in spite of the care of the parents, are they still responsible? No. But the more the child is disposed toward wrongdoing, the heavier their task is, and the greater will be their merit if they manage to divert the child away from the wrongful path. And if a child becomes a good adult, despite the negligence or bad examples of the parents, do the parents receive any benefit from it? God is just. 584. What could be the nature of the missions of conquerors whose only aim is to satisfy their ambition, and who, in order to reach their goal, do not recoil before any calamity that they may cause? Ooh, it's a great question. Most of the time, they are nothing more than instruments used by God for fulfilling the divine designs. Such calamities are often the means for enabling a people to advance more rapidly. Okay, so if those who are the instruments of such temporary calamities are unaware of the good that may result from them because they inflicted them with a personal aim in mind, will they nevertheless profit from the resultant good? All are rewarded according to their deeds, the good they meant to do, and the honesty of their intentions. Whew, that is a very thin line to tread. You know what I mean? Like, that's like saying that that's like asking, okay, so Hitler did this horrible thing and created World War III, so World War II, and millions and millions and millions of people died. But in the end, we had great advancements in technology, great advancements in dentistry, great advancements in genetics, great advancements in this, that. We also taught an entire generation of people how to be much more empathetic and compassionate to differing kinds of people because of this, and blah, 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 blah. So does that mean that Hitler gets to be rewarded after death? And like he's basically saying here that all are rewarded according to their deeds, the good that they meant to do, and the honesty of their intentions. So, in a way, the answer is yes, but it's also no, because the original intent of someone like a Hitler or someone like a Trump or whatever was not to do good. The original intent was completely, um, personal and all about their own like deeds and their own wants and desires. So, even though good things came out of it, they're not going to be rewarded for that. So I really want to make that clear because I know that that could be read and people will be like, what? They're going to get rewarded anyway? They're going to, what? Like, no. But at the same time, to kind of, be the devil's advocate and show the flip side of that coin, from this perspective, all spirits are meant to evolve. So although, these evil human beings, Stalins and Hitlers and this and that, lived on this earth and did all these awful things, when they cross over, their next mission is to then do something else that helps their spirit evolve and be a part of something else that helps them be better than they were in that previous life. So, it's really important for you to understand that it's really not about punishment and reward, but more about the divine plan and spirit evolution, because the goal is to get to that highest level where now you don't have to worry about all of these other things. It's kind of like that Hindu concept of being stuck in the whirlpool of samsara, right? The whole life whirlpool, and and you know enlightening yourself out of that place. you know Incarnate spirits have occupations inherent to their corporal existence. In the errant state or dematerialization, their occupations are in proportion to their degree of advancement. Some journey from world to world, learning and preparing for a new incarnation, and others, more advanced, occupy themselves with progress by directing events and suggesting favorable thoughts. They assist the geniuses who concur in the advancement of humankind. Others reincarnate on a mission of progress And still others take under their care individuals, families, human algorithmations, cities, and peoples for whom they become guardian angels and protector spirits and familiar spirits of. And finally, others preside over the phenomenon of nature, of which they are the direct agents. Ordinary spirits meddle in our occupations and amusements. Impure and imperfect spirits wait in suffering and anguish for the moment in which it pleases God to grant them the means of advancing. If they practice evil, it is out of spite for not yet being able to enjoy the good. So we are on the next chapter. That was actually a really short chapter. Let me see how long this chapter is. Oh, it's not that long. What time is it? Oh, we can do it. All right. So the next chapter is called The Three Kingdoms. And the subcategories are minerals and plants, animals and human beings, and metempsychosis. All right, let's do this. The Three Kingdoms, minerals and plants. 585. What do you think of the division of nature into three kingdoms or into two classes, organic beings and inorganic beings? Some regard the human species as a fourth kingdom. Which of these divisions is preferable? They're all good. It depends on one's point of view. From a material point of view, there are only inorganic and organic beings. And from the mental point of view, however, there are obviously 4 degrees. These 4 degrees, in fact, have well marked characteristics, although their edges seem to blend into each other. Inert matter, which comprises the mineral kingdom, possesses no more than a mechanical energy. Plants, although composed of inert matter, are endowed with vitality. Animals, composed of inert matter and endowed with vitality, also have a kind of instinctive, limited intelligence with an awareness of their existence and individuality. And lastly, humans, beings possessing everything that exists in plants and animals, and they dominate all the other classes through a special and unlimited intelligence that provides them with that awareness of their future and the perception of extra material things and the knowledge of God. Do plants have any awareness of their existence? No, they do not think. They only have organic life. Hi, Bravo. We are reading The Spirit Book by Allan Kardec. 587. Do plants feel sensations? Do they suffer when mutilated? Plants receive the physical impressions that act upon matter, but they do not have perceptions. Consequently, they do not feel the sensation of pain. 588. Is the force that attracts plants toward each other independent of their will? Yes, because they do not think. It is a mechanical force of matter acting upon matter. They cannot oppose it. 589. Some plants, the mimosa and the dinoa, for example, show movements that indicate great sensitivity and in some cases a kind of will, like the latter whose lobes seize the fly that lands on it in order to suck its juices, seeming to have set a trap to kill it. Are these plants endowed with the faculty of thought? Do they have a will, and do they form an intermediary class between the plant and animal nature? Do they comprise a transition from one to the other? Everything in nature is a transition by the same fact that one thing does not resemble another, and that everything, nevertheless, is linked together. Plants do not think, and consequently have no will, but the oyster, which opens itself to all the zoophytes, do not possess thought. They have no more than blind and natural instinct. The human organism furnishes us with examples of analog movements that do not involve any participation of the will, such as the digestive and circulatory functions. The pylorus closes itself on contact with certain substances to refuse them passage. The same applies to the mimosa, whose movements do not imply any perception at all, much less a will. 590. In plants, as in animals, isn't there an instinct for self-preservation that leads them to seek what they may be useful to them and to avoid what may harm them? There is, if you wish, a kind of instinct. It depends on the extent you attribute to the word, but it is purely mechanical. When you see two bodies combined during a chemical reaction, it is because they harmonize with each other. That is, there is an infinity between them, but you do not call it instinct. 591. On more highly evolved worlds, are plants like the other beings more perfect than nature? Everything is more perfect, but the plants are always plants, as animals are always animals, and as human beings are always human beings. Okay, we're now on the subject of animals and human beings. 592. If we compare human beings with animals in relation to intelligence, it seems difficult to establish a line of decarmization because certain animals on this earth have an obvious superiority over certain humans. Can such a line of demarcation be established in a precise manner? Your philosophers are not in much agreement about this subject. Some would want for humans to be animals and others for animals to be human. Both are wrong. Humans are beings apart who sometimes sink very low or who may sometimes ascend very high. In their physical nature, humans are more like animals and less well endowed than many of them. Nature has given the animals everything that humans are obligated to invent with their intelligence in order to provide for their own needs and self preservation. Their body is destroyed like that of animals, that is certain. But their spirit has a destiny that they alone can comprehend because they alone are completely free. Poor humans who debase yourselves more than wild animals. Don't you know how to distinguish yourselves from them? Recognize human beings through their ability to think about God. 593. Could we say that animals act only through instinct? That again is a theory. It is quite true that instinct dominates most animals, but don't you see some that act from a determined will? It is because they have limited intelligence. Sorry, you guys, I have a tickle in my throat. Could one could not deny to certain animals the practice of complex actions that denote the will to act in a determined sense beyond instinct and according to circumstances. Therefore, there is in them a kind of intelligence, but in exercising it, they are concentrating it more on the means of satisfying their physical needs and providing for their self preservation. Among them, there is no creation, no improvement. Whatever may be the skill that we admire in their labors, that which they did yesterday is the same as what they will do today, neither better nor worse, according to constant and unvarying forms of proportions. Offspring separated from their species do not fail to build their nest in accordance with the same model without having been taught. In some animals, if some animals are capable of a certain amount of learning, such intellectual development is always restricted within narrow limits and is due to human action on a flexible nature. They cannot make any progress by themselves, and when they do make progress, it is ephemeral and purely individual because if abandoned to themselves, they quickly return to the limits traced out for them by nature. Wow. Wow. 594. Do animals have language? If you mean a language formed of words and syllables, no. But if you mean a way of communicating amongst themselves, then yes. They say many more things than you might suppose, but their language is limited to their needs, as are their thoughts. There are animals that possess no voice. Aren't they deprived of language? They understand one another by other means. Don't you human beings use more than speech to communicate with one another? And mutes, what about them? Since animals are endowed with a life of relationships, they have means of warning each other and of expressing the sensations they experience. Do you think that fish do not understand each other? Human beings do not have the exclusive privilege of language, but the language of animals is instinctive and limited exclusively to the circle of their needs and their thoughts, while that of humans is perfectible and lends itself to all conceptions of their intelligence. Actually, fish, like swallows, which migrate en masse, obeying the lead, must have means of warning and understanding one another and grouping together. Perhaps having a sharper sight allows them to see the signs that they make to each other. And perhaps the water is a vehicle that transmits certain vibrations to them. Whatever the case may be, it is undeniable that they have the means available to understand one another, in the same way as all animals deprived of voice performs activities in common. In light of this, must one wonder at spirits being able to communicate with one another without recourse to articulate speech? 595. Do animals have free will? They are not simple machines, as you might suppose, but their freedom of action is limited to their needs and cannot be compared to human freedom. Since they are far less evolved than human beings, they do not have the same duties. Their freedom is restricted to the actions of their material life. 596. Where do certain animals get their aptitude to imitate human language? And why is this aptitude found more among birds than among apes, for example, whose body structure is more analogous to the human structure? The particular conformation of the vocal organs aided by the instinct of imitation. Apes imitate gestures, and certain birds imitate the voice. 597. Well, since animals have an intelligence that gives them a certain freedom of action, is there in them a principle of independent of matter? Yes, and it survives their body. Is this principle a soul, similar to that of humans? It is a soul, if you'd like. It depends on the meaning you attach to the word. It is less evolved than that of humans. However, between the souls of animals and humans, there is a difference as there is between human soul and God. Ooh, sorry, guys. I'm so uncomfortable tonight. I don't know what's going on. 598. Does the animal's soul retain its individuality and self awareness after death? Its individuality, yes, but not its self awareness. Its intelligent life remains in a latent state. 599. Can an animal soul choose the species in which it prefers to incarnate? No, it does not possess free will. 600. Since the animal's soul survives its body, does it remain in an errant state like the human soul after death? It remains in a type of errant state because it is not united to a body, but it is not an errant spirit. The errant spirit is a being who thinks and acts of its own free will. Animal spirits do not have that same faculty. Self awareness is what compromises this principal attribute of the human spirit. After its death, an animal's soul is classified by the spirits in charge of doing so, and it is utilized almost immediately. It is not given time to enter into relations with other creatures. 601. Do animals follow a law of progress like humans do? Yes. And that is why on higher worlds, where humans are more advanced, the animals are also more advanced and possess more developed means of communication. However, they are always lower than humans and subject to them. They are their intelligent servants. There is nothing extraordinary about this. Let us imagine that our more intelligent animals, such as the dog, or an elephant, or the horse, were endowed with a physical conformation appropriate for manual labor. What mightn't they do under human direction? 602. Do animals progress by their will, like human beings, or by necessity? By necessity. That is why there is no excipiation for them. 603. On highly evolved worlds, do the animals know about God? No. Human beings are gods to them, as spirits used to be gods to humans. 604. Since the animals even the perfected ones of the higher worlds, are always beneath humans, wouldn't this result in God having created intelligent beings perpetually condemned to inferiority? If so, wouldn't this seem to be in disagreement with the unity of design and progress discernible in all of God's work? Ooh, did you hear that question? He trying to stump the spirit right now. Oh my goodness. Let's read the juice. Let's read the juice. Everything in nature is linked together by ties that you cannot yet perceive, and the most apparently discrepant things have points of contact that humans will never manage to comprehend in their present state. They may glimpse them through an effort of their intelligence, but it is only when the intelligence has reached its full development and frees itself from the prejudices of pride and ignorance that they will be able to see clearly into the works of God. Until then, their limited ideas will cause them to look at everything from a petty and limited point of view. Rest assured that God cannot be self contradictory, and that everything in nature is harmonized through general laws that never deviate from the sublime wisdom of the Creator. Way to go for not answering that question, right? Um, then intelligence is a common property, a point of contact between the souls of animals and humans? Yes, but animals only have the intelligence of material life, and humans' intelligence produce moral life. 605. If we considered all the points of contact between humans and animals, might we believe that humans possess two souls, an animal soul and a spirit soul, and that if they did not have the latter, they would live only as an animal? In other words, isn't the animal a being similar to the human minus the spiritual soul? If so, wouldn't it follow that the good and the bad instincts of humans would be the effect of the predominance of one or another of these two souls? Ooh, these questions are loaded. I love it. No, humans do not have two souls, but the body has its instincts, which result from the sensation of its organs. There is nothing in humans except a dual nature, the animal nature and the spiritual nature. Through their body and instincts, they participate in the nature and instincts of animals, and through their soul, they participate in the nature of spirits. Thus, besides getting rid of its own imperfections, must the spirit also struggle against the influence of matter? Yes. The less evolved it is, the tighter are the bonds between the spirit and matter. Can't you see that? No, humans do not have two souls. The soul is always one in each individual. The soul of animals and that of humans are so very different from each other that the soul of one cannot animate the body created for the other. But if humans do not possess an animal soul whose passions would place it on the level of the animals, they nonetheless have an animal body which often drags them down to that level. For its body is an entity endowed with vitality and instincts which are unintelligent and limited to self-preservation. So this makes a lot of sense. Those anyone who might be familiar with the Bible, it talks about how, the sins of the flesh versus, the virtues of the soul, and how we must overcome the sins of the flesh. It's kind of like that in the sense that our bodies are of a material and spiritual nature, and that the way in which we conduct our bodies and what we do with our bodies can be animalistic in nature or spiritual in nature, but the soul itself can never be an animal soul or a human soul. It's just one soul, and it's a human one. Savage, we are reading The Spirit Book by Allan Kardec. Okay. When a spirit incarnates into a human body, it transmits to it the intellectual and moral principles that places it on a higher order than the animals. The two natures in humans give two distinct sources to their passions. Some spring from the instincts of nature, and others from the impurities of the incarnate spirit, with which sympathizes to a greater or lesser degree with the baseness of the animal appetites. In purifying itself, a spirit frees itself from the influence of matter little by little, and under such influence it approaches the animals, and freed from such influence, it rises toward a true destiny. 606. Where do animals get the intelligent principle that comprises the particular kind of soul with which they are endowed? From the universal intelligent element. Take note of that. Write that down. The universal intelligent element. So then the intelligence of both humans and animals emanates from a single principle? Of course. But in humans, it goes through a development that elevates it above that of animals. 607. It has been stated that the human soul, at its origin, resembles the state of human infancy in the corporal life, that its intelligence is only beginning to unfold, and that it's preparing itself for life. Where does the soul accomplish this primary phase? In a series of existences preceding the period you call humanity. Okay, then would it seem that the soul had been the intelligent principle of the lower beings of creation? Correct? Haven't we stated that everything in nature is linked together and tends toward unity? It is in those beings whom you are far from knowing about entirely that the intelligent principle is developed, is gradually individualized, and is prepared for life, as we have stated. In a certain way, it is preparatory work like that of germination, after which the intelligent principle undergoes transformation and becomes a spirit. It is then that the period of humanity begins for it, and with it, the consciousness of its future, the distinction between good and evil, and the responsibility for its acts. The same way that childhood comes before adolescence, then youth, and finally adulthood. There is nothing humiliating about this origin. Do the greatest geniuses feel humiliated at having been shapeless fetuses in the material womb? If anything ought to humiliate them, it is their low status before God and their powerlessness to probe the depths of the divine designs and the wisdom of the laws regulating the harmony of the universe. Strive to realize the greatness of God in the admirable harmony that establishes the solidarity of all things in nature. To believe that God could have made anything without a purpose and have created intelligent beings without a future would be to blaspheme God's goodness, which extends over all creatures. Does this period of humanity bring on our earth? That's a weird question. Does this period of humanity begin on our earth? The earth is not the starting point of humans' first incarnation, not the starting point. The period of humaneness usually begins on other worlds even less evolved. This, however, is not an absolute rule, and it may happen that a spirit at its human beginning may be suited to live here on Earth. Such a case is not frequent and would be an exception rather than a rule. 608. So after death, does a human spirit have any awareness of the existence that preceded its period of humaneness? No, because it is only after that period that its life as a spirit began. It even has difficulty in remembering its first existences as a human, exactly as humans no longer remember the earliest days of their childhood, and still less the time they spent in the maternal womb. That is why spirits tell you that they do not know how they began. 609. Having entered the period of humanness, sorry, does a spirit retain traces of what it had previously been? That is, of the state in which it was during the period that could be called non-human? Well, that depends on the distance separating the two periods and the progress it has accomplished. For a few generations, it may preserve a more or less pronounced reflection of a primitive state, for nothing in nature occurs through an abrupt transition. There are always links connecting the end of a chain of beings and events. However, such traces disappear with the development of free will. The first steps of progress are accomplished slowly because they are not yet aided by the will, but they follow a more rapid progress as the spirit acquires a more perfect consciousness of itself. Well, then, are the spirits who have said that humans are beings apart in order of creation mistaken? No. But the issue has not been fully developed, and there are things that can only come in their time. Humans are, in fact, beings apart, for they have faculties that distinguish them from all others, and they have another destiny. The human species is the one God has chosen for the incarnation of the beings who can know God. All right, and now we're on the last subject, which is only 2 pages. It's called metempsychosis. Metempsychosis. Let's do this. 611. Isn't the common origin of living beings in the intelligent principle an affirmation of the doctrine of metempsychosis? Two things may have the same origin and yet not resemble each other at all later on. Who would recognize the tree, its leaves, its flowers, and its fruit in the shapeless germ contained in the seed from which they came? From the moment when the intelligent principle reaches the necessary degree for becoming a spirit and for entering the period of humanness, it has no more relationship with its primitive state. It is no longer the soul of the animal, like the tree is no longer a seed. In humans, there is only the animal like body, the passions that arise from that body's influence, and the instincts of self preservation inherent in matter. Therefore, one cannot state that such and such a person in the incarnation of such and such an animal. Consequently, metempsychosis, as commonly understood, is incorrect. 612. Could a spirit that has animated a human body incarnate in an animal? That would be considered a regression, and a spirit does not regress. The river does not flow back to its source. 613. However erroneous may be the idea linked to metempsychosis, couldn't it be a result of the intuitive sentiment of the different existences of an individual? We recognize such an intuitive sentiment in this belief as in many others, but like most intuitive ideas, humans have perverted it. Metempsychosis would be correct if one understood it to mean the progression of the soul from a lower to a higher state, accomplishing the developments that will transform its nature. However, it is erroneous in the meaning of a direct transmigration from the animal to the human and vice versa, which would imply the idea of regression or fusion. And since such fusion is not possible between corporal beings of two different species, we have an indication of their being of degrees that cannot assimilate each other. And the same must apply to the spirits that animate them. If the same spirit could animate them alternately, it would result in an identity of nature. And this would translate into the possibility of material reproduction. On the contrary, the reincarnation taught by the spirits is founded upon the evolutionary march of nature and the progression of humans within their own species, which in no way diminishes their dignity. What degrades them is the bad use they make of the faculties God has given them for their advancement. Be what it may, the antiquity and universality of the doctrine of metempsychosis and the number of eminent individuals who have professed it proves that the principle of reincarnation has its roots in nature itself. These are arguments in its favor rather than against it, however. So just to kind of let you guys know, metempsychosis is an actual theory. There was tons of books written about it, lots of philosophy around it, having to do with reincarnation and this idea that when we reincarnate, we can reincarnate back and forth into anything. So like if we die and we reincarnate, we can be an animal or we can be a bug or we can be a plant and vice versa. A plant will die and they could be a human or they could be an animal. And this book is saying, no, that's bullshit because there are levels of spirit and plants and animals are of a different level of spirit and of a lower level of spirit than humans. And I hate to use the word lower because it implies less than, but it doesn't mean less than. It just means it's a different species. And it's a different species that does not have a comprehension of God. It does not have a purpose doesn't have a comprehension of their purpose to strive towards God. And so for that, it would be considered a regression to be reborn into an animal or a plant. And so that's why they're saying this theory of metempsychosis is bullshit. The point of departure of a spirit is one of those issues that are connected to the origin of things and that are among the secrets of God. It has not been given to humans to know them completely, and regarding them, they can only form mere suppositions, constructing more or less probable theoretical systems. The spirits themselves are far from knowing everything, and regarding what they do not know, they may also have their own opinions that are more sensible or less sensible. It is thus that all do not think in the same way regarding the connections between humans and animals. According to some, a spirit only arrives at the human period after having been prepared and individualized in the different degrees of the lower order beings of creation. So you see, so there's even debate among the spirits themselves, saying that no, we the whole point is to evolve upward and um to enlighten our spirit. And so it is possible for a plant to then become an animal, to then become a human, and so on and so forth. And then you have other spirits that are like, no, it doesn't work like that. Or you have spirits that believe that, but then they don't believe in the regression of that, in the reversal of that. So a lot going on. According to others, the human spirit would have always belonged to the human race, rather without having passed through the animal experience. The first of these theories has the advantage of giving an aim to the future of animals, which thus comprise the first links in the chain of thinking beings. And the second is more in conformance with the dignity of the human beings and may be summed up as follows. So we're summing up that second theory. The different species of animals do not proceed intellectually from one another by way of evolution. Thus, the spirit of the oyster does not subsequently become that of a fish, and the bird, and the quadruped, and finally the biped. Each species is an absolute type in itself, physically and mentally, and each of its individuals draws from the universal source the quantity of the intelligent principle that it needs according to the perfection of its organs and the work it must perform in the phenomenon of nature. It then returns to the general mass at death. Those words are more advanced than ours. Those worlds are more advanced than ours and are also comprised of distinct species of animals that are appropriate to the needs of those worlds and to the degree of advancement of the humans they serve. But they do not proceed from those of the earth, spiritually speaking. It is not the same with human beings, however. From the physical point of view, human beings are obviously a link in the chain of living beings, but from the moral point of view, there is a break in continuity between humans and animals. Only human beings possess a soul or a spirit, a divine spark that endows them with the moral sense and an intellectual reach that animals do not possess. It is the principal being, pre-existent in the surviving in pre-existent to and surviving the body, preserving their individuality. What is the origin of spirit? Where is the starting point? It is formed from the individualized intelligent principle. This is a mystery that would be useless to search out, and regarding which, as we have said, we can only construct theories. What is constant and what stands out is reason and experience at the same time is the survival of the spirit and preservation of its individuality after death. Its ability to evolve its happy or unhappy state in proportion to its advancement on the path of the good, and all the moral truths that are the consequence of the principle. And as for the mysterious connections between animals and humans, that, we repeat, is God's secret. Like many other matters whose current understanding holds no importance for our advancement, and on which it would be useless for us to dwell. So basically, that chapter really didn't give you an answer. Do we, as humans, when we die, all of our previous incarnations, were they always human? Or were we plants and animals at one point that eventually, were reincarnated so many times and learned and grew so many times that eventually we came to this human state and will eventually keep going? And the spirits are basically saying even they don't have the answer to that. we don't know. But one thing is for sure that they do know is that we can't regress backwards. So humans cannot be reborn into a plant or an animal, but there is a possibility that animals, plants, and humans, the link possibly could have been that way. But that it's one of God's mysteries. So there it is. All right, y'all. We actually finished on time tonight, 8 p.m., and we did 2 chapters. I'm so excited. So so now we're gonna open up the floor for questions. For anyone who might have just popped in, we have read from Allan Kardec's The Spirit Book. Next time we meet, we will be doing part 3 of the book. And part 3 of the book is the part about moral laws. So this is when we get into like divine and natural law, good versus evil, worship, sacrifice, polytheism, prayer, all the things that we as humans do. The work ethic and labor, what does that mean? Reproduction, all kinds of subjects that we as humans kind of grapple with, all those philosophical, existential subjects. That's going to be what we start off with next week, and I'm so excited. So if you don't have any questions, then I will end it, and we will meet up here next Sunday, which is, let me get the date for you guys. Next Sunday is the 21st. So it'll be Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, same place. And we will pick up where we left off. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really, really, really appreciate it. Cheers to you guys. Have a wonderful night. See you next week. Bye, guys.